Good evening, it's 8 p.m. local time here in Warsaw. I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World News Tonight. We are the generation that will stand up in arms to defend our country, said the chief of the General Staff of the Polish Army. These words caused a true political storm. There are also calls for the general's resignation. More on that in just a moment, but first let's take a look at tonight's headlines. In the past 24 hours, Russian forces have carried out more than 5,000 attacks on Ukrainian territory. Donald Trump returned with a rally to Butler, where a gunman tried to kill him. Elon Musk was at his side. And Kosovo Prime Minister calls for a restoration of security zone on border with Serbia. Head of the Polish General Staff, General Wiesław Kukuła, has shocked the public opinion by stating that Poles may soon have to fight for their independence with a gun in hand. These words were met with much criticism from former military officers and politicians who accused the general of spreading fear.
The opening of a new academic year at the Military University of Land Forces in Wrocław is an important event, especially in the extraordinary times of a major war raging next door. Chief of the General Staff, General Wiesław Kukuła, made the event a little more extraordinary than expected with his comments.
The current transformation is a process by which we change the armed forces from their current form to a form we need in order to win a war. If there are some in this room who do not yet have this conviction, I would like to tell you that all the signs indicate that we are the generation that will fight, weapon in hand, in defense of our state.
The general's words were taken as a warning that the Polish armed forces would almost certainly be fighting a war in the coming years. Since few people share this view, Kukuła was criticized for needlessly spreading fear. One such comment came from General Komornicki, a former deputy chief of staff.
The general is spreading a narrative of fear, scaring the Poles. This narrative is very consequential. The general says that we do not intend to lose a war, instead of assuring people that Russia will not dare attack us.
Another part of the general's speech also proved controversial, as it seemed to imply the war that he was predicting would be fought abroad. In the current context, this was interpreted as an intention to send Polish troops to Ukraine. Two former prime ministers, Leszek Miller and Jan Bielecki, called for Kukuła's resignation.
It would be best if General Wiesław Kukuła resigned. He could, for example, form a legion composed of radicals to go east and fight Russia. They need soldiers over there.
Poland is currently undergoing a rapid modernization of its armed forces. Next year's defense budget is planned at 43 billion euros, amounting to 4.7% of the country's GDP. Officials have repeatedly stressed that the main aim of the modernization is deterrence, as opposed to preparations for the inevitable. A country which is difficult to invade is less likely to be invaded in the first place.
Ukraine is preparing for the Ramstein Group meeting next week. President Zelensky will present his victory plan at the event, hoping for an increase in military aid. Ukraine has repeatedly called on its allies for a green light to attack Russian military objects inside Russia with Western-made long-range weapons.
While massive amounts of weapons and ammunition have been transferred to Ukraine since the start of the war, they have not been enough to secure a victory. President Zelensky has a plan how to change that.
And everything in the plan is absolutely realistic for our partners. This is our goal, our task, to guarantee Ukraine a lasting peace and security. This is possible only on the basis of international law and without any trade in sovereignty or trade in territories.
One key point of the plan is the permission to use Western long-range missiles on Russian territory, something Kyiv has been lobbying for months. But some analysts say this is not a key capability.
Now, you guys in the media, you focus on the long-range strike permissions into Russia, which frankly is not a game changer on the battlefield.
In recent months, Ukraine has been using swarms of long-range drones to target arms and fuel depots deep inside Russian territory. These drones, however, are slow and easy to detect on radar, giving the Russians ample warning time. While thousands of tons of fuel and ammunition cannot be moved quickly, people, vehicles and aircraft can. Newer Ukrainian drones are jet-powered, which reduces the warning time. Still, Western missiles would be better suited to the task because they have stealth capabilities. With these weapons, Ukraine could drastically reduce warning time, allowing it to strike parked aircraft and command posts.
Ukraine needs right now is to mobilize additional men to man the front lines. It needs training and equipping of its new brigades, and it badly, desperately needs air defense systems. That's why President Biden has decided to host a leaders-level Ukraine defense contact group.
While Ukraine is pushing for more military supplies, the idea of ending the war through a negotiated settlement has been gaining traction in Western media. According to the Financial Times, Western diplomats are increasingly inclined to promote the so-called West German solution. This would see Ukraine enter NATO, but only parts of its territory would be covered by security guarantees. Kyiv would have to give up occupied territory for a while, with the hopes that, similar to how West Germany absorbed the East, it might regain them years later through political means.
The Russian offensive in eastern Ukraine continues, with more than 5,000 attacks launched in the past 24 hours alone. The Ukrainian military also reports nearly 170 clashes on the front lines. Will the Russians be able to keep up the pace? And what can Kyiv do to stall that progress? We're joined by our correspondent in Ukraine, Oskar Terzi. Good evening, Oskar. So what's the current situation on the Ukrainian front lines?
Well, it is a difficult situation indeed. They're stretched thin, the Ukrainian forces on the east, which is why there have been some criticisms in some quarters of the decision to go into the Kursk region of Russia, further stretching Ukraine's defenses. Now, the Russians have been slowly progressing and advancing along several axes in the east of the country. And that's been going on for several months now. It's been the story of much of this summer and now heading into autumn. However, we are expecting the winter months to start biting. It's starting getting very cold here in Ukraine. It will start hitting freezing temperatures soon enough, and at which point the fighting tends to stop until spring. So I do think the Ukrainians are in a very difficult position right now, and they're going to be looking to try and at least hope that the winter months come in, that it pauses the fighting and that they can rebuild some of those fortifications ahead of the renewed fighting season in the spring. Now, it's been, as you said, a difficult 24-hour period for Ukraine. 4 people have been killed, 30 others wounded as there are attacks across Ukraine, drone attacks, cruise missile attacks and ballistic missile attacks. So Ukraine is in a difficult position right now, and they will be hoping for some respite, at least from the worst of the fighting in the winter months to come.
So there's hope in the winter. It was Oskar Terzi reporting from Kyiv. Thank you so much, Oskar, and of course, stay safe. Almost a year has passed since Hamas terrorists launched an unprecedented attack against Israeli civilians, thus setting in motion a spiral of violence which claimed the lives of thousands and made millions lose their homes. Today, war in the Middle East is closer than ever as Tel Aviv continues the bombardment of Lebanon, and Iran calls on all Muslim states to join the struggle against Israel.
Last year, on October 7th, Hamas invaded Israel from Gaza in a terrorist attack. About 1,200 people were killed and 250 taken hostage. This triggered a war in Gaza, which ended up in the desolation of the enclave. The attacks forced a 2.3 million Palestinian population to flee, caused a hunger crisis and claimed the lives of nearly 42,000 Palestinians, according to Gaza's health ministry. The conflict on the Israeli-Lebanese border also reignited as Hezbollah, in solidarity with the Palestinians, shelled the Israeli positions in the Shebaa farms on October 8th. The following year saw a further escalation of the conflict. culminating in the assassination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah last Friday, followed by Iran's firing of over 200 rockets at Israeli territory. On Sunday, an official commemoration of the attacks was held in Israel. It was preceded by intense shelling of southern Lebanon and Gaza. In Gaza, a school and a mosque were hit, killing at least 24 people. But there was another ceremony in Tel Aviv, organized by the families of the victims and hostages of last year's attacks.
And I think the government memorial will not mention the things, the mistakes that happened on the 7th. And we're going to talk about this.
However, the support for the war among the Israeli people is still very strong.
So we must remember that 70% of the society supports the war and the actions taken by this government of Mr. Netanyahu.
Also, the United States supports the actions of Israel.
Make no mistake, the United States is fully supportive of Israel.
But over the last year, the scale of the killing and destruction in Gaza has inspired pro-Palestinian demonstrations around the world. On the first anniversary of the attacks, crowds took to the streets of major cities around the world.
No excuse to kill children and civilians and destroy houses and universities for nothing.
Experts are divided on the future of the conflict, but as Iran calls for the strengthening of its axis of resistance and Netanyahu vows to support the fight against Hezbollah despite attempts at a ceasefire, further escalation seems more likely.
With less than a month to the vote, the US presidential campaign is in full swing, and so Donald Trump has accused the Democratic Party of trying to kill him, while Elon Musk has implied that Kamala Harris' political camp intends to take away the American people's freedom of speech. Let's take a closer look at Trump's rally in Pennsylvania.
Donald Trump has returned to the stage in Butler, Pennsylvania, exactly 3 months after a failed assassination attempt on his life.
At this time, it is 6:11, 12 weeks to the minute that the shooting began. I would like to ask everyone to join me in a moment of silence.
While declaring his commitment to the American working class, Trump further incited the conflict between the Republicans and the Democrats, saying his opposition may be behind his failed assassination attempts.
Over the past 8 years, those who want to stop us from achieving this future have slandered me, impeached me, indicted me, tried to throw me off the ballot, and who knows, maybe even tried to kill me.
Elon Musk, CEO of Tesla and X, joined former President Donald Trump on stage. Musk echoed Trump's allegations against Democrats.
And I think this election, I think it's the most important election of our lifetime. This is no ordinary election. The other side wants to take away your freedom of speech. They want to take away your right to bear arms. They want to take away your right to vote effectively.
Ever since Elon Musk purchased X, formerly known as Twitter, he has come under fire for mishandling the spread of misinformation and disinformation on his website. We spoke to a Polish-American lawyer about these false accusations made by both Donald Trump and Elon Musk.
And in this context, I think Kamala Harris, in her recent speech, pointed out that the Republicans and Trump campaign is reverting to something which we call gaslighting. Just go online and do fact-checking. There are lots of institutions which do that. So with a little effort, you can really dismantle those lies that are being said.
The expert speculates that Trump and Musk joining forces and calling for voters to register is a telltale sign of Trump's weakening star power.
The negativity that is surrounding the candidacy of Trump, that has been well presented, is probably going to cause some Republicans. They're not going to vote for Democrats. They're not going to vote for Kamala Harris because they think she's a socialist or whatever, as being lied to them. But they might not vote at all.
With less than a month to go before the election, recent polls show no clear leader in the race.
Prime Minister of Kosovo, Albin Kurti, has called for a buffer zone between Serbia and Kosovo to be reinstated as the country fears an invasion from its hostile neighbour. This comes as both countries seek to become full-fledged members of the European Union.
The 5-kilometer ground safety zone was established in 1999 following the signing of the Kumanovo Agreement, which ended the Kosovo War and led to the withdrawal of NATO troops. It was disbanded in 2001. 23 years later, both Serbia and Kosovo are on their way to join the European Union, but a newly reinstated buffer zone could make it a bumpy ride. Kurti made the request at his party's recent meeting.
Considering that in the last 2 years, Serbia has deployed its army on our border 4 times, it is imperative to reinstate the 5-kilometer buffer zone on the Kosovo-Serbia border.
But on October 2nd, while speaking to our host at the Warsaw Security Forum, Albin Kurti said himself that the tensions between Serbia and Kosovo were negatively impacting the country's EU accession efforts.
However, the dispute that we have with Serbia, the lack of normalization of relations, plays a role because it strengthens certain skepticism.
We spoke to a professor from the University of Pristina, an expert on Kosovo's independence, to better understand the implications of the Prime Minister's request.
It is understandable that as long as we have such tensions, it will have direct implications in the integration process, be it for Kosovo as well as for Serbia. Well, I think that it's in the interest of the EU and international community that we have first and foremost peace.
An introduction of said buffer zone is an international issue.
Well, it might be, it's a matter of evaluation by NATO members because first and foremost it's a responsibility of NATO.
While making his request, Kurti called on the European Union and the US to abstain from aiding Serbia and to impose sanctions on anyone he said protects and cooperates with terrorists.
The citizens of Kazakhstan have voted to answer a question: should Kazakhstan build a nuclear power plant or not? It may sound like a simple question, but given the country's history with the atom, it is anything but. And it could also bring the country even closer to Russia.
Sunday's vote on building a nuclear power plant brings back painful memories. While one of the most uranium-rich countries in the world, Kazakhstan has always been wary of nuclear power. Large areas of land have been rendered uninhabitable in the country that served as a testing ground for the Soviet nuclear weapons program. Health problems have been attributed to the murky circumstances surrounding the hundreds of bombs detonated over those 4 decades. Radiation levels are still high, although the last nuclear test took place 35 years ago. Also, as in the rest of the Soviet Union, the Chernobyl disaster of 1986 is still seared into the collective consciousness. The prospect of a similar disaster terrifies Kazakhstanis to the core. Residents of the town where the plant is planned are divided.
I don't want a nuclear plant in our town. We'll lose the lake and the fish. Now the people who live here make their living mainly from fishing. There are some jobs, but everyone still fishes. I support the plant because it is good for our children's future. That's what I think.
But for the government, nuclear power is the only logical next step to take. Kazakhstan has close to 1/5 of the world's uranium resources. Only a resounding yes will do for President Tokayev. The country is currently dependent on aging coal-fired power plants. The strain on Kazakhstan's power grid is increasing every year. The nuclear project is vital for energy security, the government argues, and it's crucial for local development.
We are hoping for new roads, infrastructure and vital facilities. If there is no construction at all, I don't know what state this village will be in 5 years.
Energy security does not, however, equate with energy independence. If approved, the new plant is to be constructed in partnership with the Russian company Rosatom.
Polish Americans have taken over Manhattan in New York City. It's time for the 87th Pulaski parade and the preservation of a beautiful tradition. This is the greatest manifestation of Polishness and the memory of General Kazimierz Pulaski, a hero in both Poland and the United States. Alex Suliński has more from the Fifth Avenue, where the parade is taking place. Hi, Alex. What's the atmosphere like this year?
Good afternoon, Maciej. Well, the 87th Pulaski Day Parade, as you see and hear, is taking place in the heart of New York City, and that is on its 5th Avenue. Now, the parade is organized every year on the first Sunday of October, and it is because this day is associated with the Day of Remembrance of General Kazimierz Pulaski, and that is October 11th, which is the anniversary of his death during the American War of Independence. And now I'll leave you for a second to listen more about this great Polish-American hero from one of the organizers of this event.
Was a soldier that came from Poland here to the United States under the invitation of General George Washington to help him win our freedom from England, so that we here in America can enjoy the freedom that we are here today. Sadly, he lost his life at age 32, but he was one of the greatest heroes in the American Revolution.
I'm proud to be here on this day because it's so exciting to be here with my family and celebrate this day, especially in America where it's people back in Poland know that this is happening here, that's something so big. And it just makes me really happy and proud that even though I was born here, this is in my blood and this is what I'm proud to be and stand for. So being here with my family makes me incredibly happy today.
Now, October is Polish Heritage Month here in the United States, celebrating all of the contributions of Polonia and Polish Americans to this country. Now, as you probably can hear, the atmosphere this year is through the roof, and organizers have told me that as much as more than 200,000 people from New York and the tri-state area are expected to attend this year. Now, so far we have seen youth clubs, all sorts of organizations marching in this parade, and I'd just like to add that this parade has been taking place since 1937. It is actually one of the longest parades to walk down 5th Avenue here in New York City and takes place each year regardless of the weather. Back to you.
That was Alex Sumliński reporting from the Pulaski Parade in New York. Thank you so much, Alex, and enjoy the parade. We are the generation that will stand up in arms to defend our country, stated the Polish highest-ranking military officer, General Wiesław Kukua. The statement came as a shock to many, as Poland, member of NATO, relies much on Article 5 of the organization, which says that an attack on one of its members is an attack against all NATO members. Now, is Russia planning to attack NATO in the nearest future, or does the head of the Polish General Staff see Polish troops deployed in war-torn Ukraine? Well, to discuss the issue, we're joined by Małgorzata Bonikowska, president of the Center for International Relations think tank. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, I'd like to ask you about your first reaction to General Kukua's words that Polish soldiers will soon have to fight for their homeland.
Tough words, but for soldiers it should be normal. Let's not forget what is a military service. It's a service in case of war. So I believe if we take these words in the context, this was a speech to the people who study at the War Academy, a military academy officers. They start a new academic year. Maybe we shouldn't exaggerate in interpreting these words. Maybe it should be put into this context that these people who study the military service should be always ready for this, whatever country they represent, wherever it is. I mean, army is an army. What do you expect? In peaceful times, it's good. Nothing happens. But in bad times, everything can happen. And those who go to the army should take it into consideration. It's a military service. It's
yes,
always
well, however, it was a public event, right? So General Kukua knew that his words would be also interpreted not just by military students, and I'm wondering whether his views are shared by the rest of the Polish top commanders.
No, and a lot of criticism we've heard about these words, and I would be very curious also for the reaction of the Ministry of Defense of Poland. But I wouldn't just concentrate just on words, and I wouldn't exaggerate in interpreting this. I would put it in the context because I think we should all remember we may be we may be in danger. You never know. If there is even 1% of the chances, we have to take it into consideration. We are at the Eastern Front of NATO, and we cannot just expect others to fight for our independence or our security. So all the countries of Eastern Front, like we say, should take into consideration the worst scenario, even if we don't have any, as of now, any signal that this will happen. But the army is for war.
Civis pacem para bellum, as Romans used to say. But former Deputy Chief of Staff General Komornicki, let me quote him, stated that the general is spreading a narrative of fear, scaring the Poles. This narrative is very consequential. The general says that we do not intend to lose a war, instead of assuring people that Russia will not dare attack us. So I'm wondering what sort of message these words carry to Russia.
Well, the message is quite tough. I mean, if Russia hears these words, the signal is that we will fight. I don't think it's a bad message. Much worse would be if Russia calculates that there is no courage at the Eastern Front countries of NATO, just in case. So I think the signal is good. Of course, it is a frightening signal to all of us. We don't want anything like that to happen. It's obvious. But I repeat, it is not a speech to the civilians. It's the speech for those people who go to the army. I mean, what army would it be if the soldiers wouldn't take into consideration that they may fight? I mean, that's the obligation, the major reason why the army exists. So I think it's a little bit, I would put it in the context of building pressure and building also a mental readiness for tough position towards anyone who would like to, at any moment, attack us, even without any signal at the moment, and I stress, without any signal at the moment that will ever happen.
Right, now, but General Kukuła seemed to hint at a possibility of Polish soldiers fighting abroad. Well, that would obviously indicate the battlefields of Ukraine. Now, what consequences will that have for Poland? And well, moreover, the Minister of Defense has already stated that there will be no Polish soldiers deployed in Ukraine. So is there a rift between the General Staff and the Ministry of Defense?
Well, of course, the official line of NATO is, and especially of the Americans, is that NATO is not directly engaged in this conflict, and we don't want such escalation. No one at the NATO side wants an open war with Russia. But in the same time, we are determined, and I think despite the time, it's even more determination right now to not only help Ukrainians, but let them win this war, in the sense that we have to avoid the scenario when Russia wins. Mm-hmm. It's very important. So I think I would put it in the context. It's a risky sentence. I agree with you. And these many opinions who criticize the general have the ground. And of course, politically speaking, it was a very tough statement. Maybe it was 2 words too far, and 1 bridge too far, like we say. But from the point of view of just pure mental readiness, it may serve in a good cause, in a sense that we have to be mentally ready for tough times. We as armies, we as soldiers, but also we as a society. Don't forget, Ukrainians fight also, not only the army, but also as a society. So I think no one wants Polish soldiers to cross the border with Ukraine and go and fight. No one expects that to happen. But we don't want the situation where there is no appetite for a tough position towards Russia. We have to understand that Ukrainians don't fight only for themselves, that they fight also for us.
But in the end, the question remains what future awaits General Kukuła after his strong words. Małgorzata Bonikowska, president of the Center for International Relations, was our guest this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and good night.
You too. And thank you for watching. That is all in this news bulletin. And of course, stay with us for much more here on TVP World.